this is what I wanted to talk a little bit about, and we were on the phone last week getting this all set up, and you had mentioned about influencers and how they're kind of taking over some stuff. But as I think about it, I'm like, Ray was actually like the original barbecue influencer. I mean, you started working with different brands and really promoting barbecue, and it's way different than it is now. Everything's so instant gratification and, posting videos and everything online. But how did that start, where you developed that relationship with the Big Green Egg and things like that, and where did that come from?
So I buy a Astro van, a Chevy Astro van, to haul my equipment around and go to cook-offs. I mean, that was a big upgrade back then. It wasn't like what you guys have now, man, these big motorhomes and stuff. And Illinois never allowed vanity license plates in the early days. Only 3 letters was all they had. So I had Ray and my license plate. And all of a sudden we allowed vanity license plates. So I wanted to get a barbecue plate. But this is how old I am, Duce. We had to order via a postcard. You called up the Secretary of State. They sent you a postcard, and you filled it out with your 3 choices for what license plate you wanted, and you mailed it back in. And then they sent you a plate. You didn't know what you were going to get. Can you imagine compared to the way you would do it now? But I honestly don't remember what my 3 choices were. Barbecue guy, barbecue man, Mr. Barbecue, Dr. Barbecue, stuff like that. I don't remember if Dr. Barbecue was my first choice. I have no idea. But that's what they sent me. So I stuck it on my van, and that was the beginning of it. It wasn't intended to be like 40 years from now, this is going to be my career. I'm going to have it trademarked and have built a whole business around it.
Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of the Duce Raymond Podcast. Today we're here with a very good friend of mine, Dr. Barbecue, Ray Lampe. How you doing, Ray?
Good, Duce. Great to see you. I didn't know you had started a podcast. I'm happy to be a guest.
Yeah, no, it's really, really cool to see you. And, our family history kind of goes back a while. Even before I was born, you knew my uncle and my dad back in the early Mike Royko Ribfest days. What can you remember from back then, back in the 80s?
So I was actually looking it up today because I never knew the date. It was 1982, the first Mike Royko Ribfest. And Uncle Dave, I think, told me it was the 17th. I didn't remember. And I was just thinking, today's the 17th. So I looked at I asked Siri what the day of the week, September 17th, 1982 was, and she said Friday. So I think tomorrow is the actual 42nd anniversary of the first Mike Royko Ribfest. So I didn't know your dad and your uncle back then, but we were both there. All 3 of us, our barbecue career, of actually any substance starts that day. It's kind of amazing. I didn't know him till many years later, but we will always have that connection. That's for sure.
That is so cool. And
what do I remember from 1982? That's a tough one because the 80s, you weren't there, Duce. The 80s were rough, man. It was we had some fun, but
yeah,
going to those cook-offs for me. So I'll tell you the story right up. I learned how to cook in high school. So in 1982, I was 25, and I was the only guy of my friends that knew how to cook. So if we were going to be any kind of food getting cooked, I was the guy. Well, a buddy of mine signed us up for the Mike Royko Ribfest, and I wasn't a barbecue guy. I had to borrow a Weber kettle. True story. You talk about Chicago stuff. I borrowed a Weber kettle and bought some ribs and did what homework I could. We didn't have the internet back then, so I looked around. And I got what info I could, and I went and I cooked some ribs, and we didn't win anything that day, but I had found my people, man, because I like to cook, but I was a 25-year-old guy in 1982. I liked to hang in the parking lot and drink beer, and I had a buddy who could build me a big smoker. As soon as I got there and started seeing these guys with their homemade smokers, I was like already had a plan. And fire, and you stand outside all day. I had found my people, and that's not a joke, man. Everybody did is, nowadays you still talk to people that they went to a cook-off or they went to a barbecue joint or they cooked some ribs or they watched Tootsie on TV or something, and it changed their life and they became barbecue freaks. Same story. It was just 42 years ago.
Yeah. I mean, that's what the story was for me about competition barbecue. The first time I was introduced to competition barbecue, I was at the restaurant, and Elk Grove Village had a KCBS competition, and there was also like a festival component to it. So we were like vending over there, and I was like running the restaurant, and we had another team of guys over vending, and Uncle Dave went over there, and this is like 14 or 15 years ago, and he's like, Duce, you got to come over here and check out this barbecue thing they got going on. And like, we had no idea what KCBS was at the time. And I went over there, and I was like, no way. Like, this is unbelievable. These guys are going to hang out all night, cook barbecue, and drink and party. And I was like, as soon as I found out about it, I was like hooked. And then what really hooked us is like the first time we actually entered into a competition and got some calls. And I mean, then you're like hook, line, and sinker in for the long
right
haul,
over here in
sure.
my office. I'm not going to touch it because it could disintegrate one of these days. Is my first barbecue trophy. There was a contest in West Chicago, a KCBS contest, the first one in Illinois in 1991.
Oh, wow.
And back then, the category was poultry. So I cooked a turkey because I didn't know any better. And I didn't even know you were supposed to cook all four. I just found out I saw a little blurb in the newspaper when the Royko Fest ended. I believe it was 90 and 91. I'm looking for something to do to replace that. And I see a little blurb in the newspaper about the first KCBS contest. And I went there. And so I still have that trophy. And I know we always tell guys, when you win your first trophy, it's going to cost you a lot of money winning that trophy, man. You may be sorry someday.
No kidding. That is the truth. So what happened after then? Like, how'd you stay in barbecue? What was your like regular career while this was going on during the 90s and stuff like that?
Well, so 1975, I get out of high school. I don't know what I'm going to do. And a month out of high school, my father passes away. And he had a family trucking business, cartage, local 20-foot straight trucks that we delivered freight around Chicago. And I wasn't planning on doing it. He didn't really want me to because it was very ups and downs. We lived well, but then I knew there was times he was having a rough go of it, and just the nature of trucking. And he didn't want me to do it, but he passed away a month after high school, so I took his job essentially to run the family business and did that for 25 years. It was a good career, so I wasn't looking for a new career. So barbecue remained my hobby. Once a year we would do the Royko Fest from 82 to 90 as I remember it. I might be wrong on exactly the dates, and then of course I had gotten my buddy to build me a big smoker, so anytime we were fixing like having a party, I'd cook a bunch of ribs, and that became my thing. And I was working on my barbecue sauce, but it was strictly a hobby. I had no intention of it being a business because I had a good business. But as things went on and the trucking business just sort of started to fade. It was just, we talk about all the factories going to China. Well, it was happening a long time ago in Chicago. All these little factories were going away, and there was no longer a need for local cartage kind of guys. There was only going to be room for a few of us left, and I just didn't have the fight in me about it. So the other thing I knew how to do was cook barbecue. So I was like, well, I guess I'll morph into that as a business. And I moved to Florida and it was like the original food truck guy. But I had no intention of it being my business. I had a retirement plan, and then I was going to go aggressively cook on the barbecue circuit. But, when the time came to do something different, I had a good career. The other thing that was happening was the internet was starting to really become a thing. So all us barbecue geeks could find each other like every other hobby. And I was pretty good at talking nonsense on the internet, and I had won enough trophies, and I had the silly beard, and I was like, I think I can make this work. And I mean,
when did you become Dr. Barbecue? How did that come about?
That was the early 90s. Unfortunately, that's a bad story. Not a bad story, it's a lame story. I had bought, so I'm getting into the competition thing, but again, I've got a good business. So I buy a Astro van, a Chevy Astro van, to haul my equipment around and go to cook-offs. I mean, that was a big upgrade back then. It wasn't like what you guys have now, man, these big motorhomes and stuff. And Illinois never allowed vanity license plates in the early days. Only 3 letters was all they had. So I had Ray and my license plate. And all of a sudden they had we allowed vanity license plates. So I wanted to get a barbecue plate. But this is how old I am, Dave, or Duce. We had we had to order via a postcard. You called up the Secretary of State. They sent you a postcard, and you filled it out with your 3 choices for what license plate you wanted, and you mailed it back in. And then they sent you a plate. You didn't know what you were going to get. Can you imagine compared to the way you would do it now? But I honestly don't remember what my 3 choices were. Barbecue guy, barbecue man, Mr. Barbecue, Dr. Barbecue, stuff like that. I don't remember if Dr. Barbecue was my first choice. I have no idea. But that's what they sent me. So I stuck it on my van, and that was the beginning of it. It wasn't intended to be like 40 years from now, this is going to be my career. I'm going to have it trademarked and have built a whole business around it. But that I tend to think that's what's so cool, because the organicness of it versus now. Yeah. Now everybody they're building their brand long before they make any money or have a business. I assume Sweet Baby Ray's was very similar too. Probably sitting around drinking some beers and that name came across the table would be my guess.
Well, there is a story behind the name Sweet Baby Ray's. So I'm surprised you haven't heard this story.
I am too, actually.
You must have heard Dave tell this story before. But so they called my dad. They grew up on the west side of Chicago. Our last name is Raymond. They called my dad Ray because of the last name. They called his little brother Baby Ray. And when Uncle Dave was playing basketball on the west side of Chicago with the brothers and he hit a jump shot, they'd be like, "That's Sweet Baby Ray."
Okay,
and
like
so
that.
that's how they came up with the name for Sweet Baby Ray.
But see, that's how it should happen, organically, a name like that.
Yeah.
You don't just make it up yourself. So I did make it up myself, but it's kind of by accident. I didn't really mean it to be like a business name. It was just a funny license plate, and it kind of stuck.
Oh, man. No kidding.
But what I did do along the way, I mentioned the internet, but when it came time to buy a website, I didn't know what I was going to do with this website, but I knew that if I didn't buy drbarbecue.com, somebody else might, so I better buy it. And I did, and I was smart enough to figure that out, and I did trademark it along the way as needed, and I played it right after the fact, but the beginning is not a great story.
I think it's pretty good. So this is what I wanted to talk a little bit about, and we were on the phone last week getting this all set up, and you had mentioned about influencers and how they're kind of taking over some stuff. But as I think about it, I'm like, Ray was actually like the original barbecue influencer. I mean, you started working with different brands and really promoting barbecue. And it's way different than it is now. Everything's so instant gratification and, posting videos and everything online. But how did that start where you developed that relationship with the Big Green Egg and things like that? And where did that come from?
Yeah, I mean, it's cool that you say that, because I sort of think about that sometimes too. Like, what would my career have been if we had YouTube and Facebook and Instagram and all that?
Because that's the kind of stuff you were doing. I mean, you really were, right?
Well, yeah, but it was at such a small level compared to what you can do now with your eyes closed. You know what I mean? It just wasn't. But I don't want to say this wrong. It took only. We couldn't all just do it back then. Everybody can have a website or a podcast or, a YouTube channel. Everybody's a video star now, which is fine, but it's watered down a little bit. I mean, I'm not saying there isn't still breakout stars. There is. But for us, it was, if you figured out how to do that, the competition was a whole lot slimmer. But they had gotten there on purpose. Myron will always tell you that story. I was sitting with Myron one day, and we were drunk. We had just filmed a TV show. I don't even remember. We were somewhere. We're sitting in a hotel drunk, and he says, Ray, you're the guy that created this. You were the first guy that was figuring out how to turn this into a business and how to get people to give you money and stuff. And I said, yeah, let me record that. And he goes, go ahead. So I get my camera out and I recorded it, and I still got it, but it's not something really very good for public sharing. we had some whiskeys in us by the time that happened, but That's just who I was, man. I was just, for one, I needed to. So when I moved to Lakeland, Florida, and be a food truck guy, well, it's not working. I was 43 years old and used to making a pretty good living, and all of a sudden I wasn't, and I just wasn't going to just sit there and do that. So I was like, what else do I figure out? How do I get this to happen? And it's just I always tell people barbecue's with the story, but it's entrepreneurship, I think. And that's the guys. Myron's a perfect example as well. Those of us, the guys, Chris Capel from Dizzy Pig, these are guys that were going to be entrepreneurial something or other. I wouldn't want to be. It's just who I am. Barbecue just happened to be the vehicle for us all, which worked out really good. Now it's different. Now you be a good barbecue guy, and you can turn that into a career. There was no path for us, and so Big Green Egg is a great story. I was a friend of mine who lived in Lakeland at the time, and he was in the grill business. He said, things were changing so much, and a lot of it had to do with the internet. He said these grill companies need to hire guys like you. They don't have any like culinary talent, and all of a sudden these grills are going to the next level. So he introduces me to Napoleon Grills, who is now becoming a bigger deal here in the U.S., but it's always been a big deal in Canada. And Napoleon used me for some big-time trade show situations for a year, and it was we did real well. We did good stuff together. It was just gas grills was their primary thing. They had some charcoal grills, but it just wasn't, it was okay. I was cooking good on the gas grills, but it didn't cross over to what my hobby was, where I had made a name for myself, which was competition, because we couldn't use those things. And I was at a trade show with Napoleon right next to the Big Green Egg guys, and I had been dogging them online for making fun of them for their grills breaking and just all kinds of stuff, really.
Oh, no.
The obsessive fans and stuff. So it's a little embarrassing. I'm next to these guys, and one of them came over, a guy named Brian, who was the Canadian distributor at the time, and he's like, I'll go talk to that guy, and he brings me a chicken wing, and I eat the chicken wing. And we all started talking and laughing after that about what had happened. And but it made way more sense for me to work for Big Green Egg because I could use it for competition. Nobody was using it yet for competitions, but at least it was possible. So I got with them. Jim Newfer was running the company basically at the time, and Jim got me on board and got me a little salary it wasn't salary, it was a contractual thing, but I started working with them and carrying around a Big Green Egg to cook-offs, and I would cook my chicken on it. And I started doing pretty good in chicken, and then there was a competition in Kentucky, and the distributor there wanted me to do something at this event. And I said, well, why don't you round up 4 eggs, and I'll cook the whole contest on eggs. And no one had ever done that before. And I did it, and I won. At the time, I was a pretty good cook. I was winning contests
so awesome.
at the time. And, it was all the big hitters were there. It was a good contest, and I beat everybody that day. And we sold like 11 eggs right afterwards because we just won the contest. And, even back then it wasn't quite as like it is now. But if you won using a left-handed chicken, everybody wanted to find the left-handed chicken next week. So we sold a bunch of Big Green Eggs, and that was the turning point for it. That trophy's around here somewhere, too. It was a Louisville Slugger.
Awesome.
It was a Louisville Slugger printed with the championship. And so then I was like, now I was qualified for the Jack, so I went back to Green Egg, and I said, well, if you want me to cook the Jack on all eggs, I will, but you got to sign me up for next year to do this again. And we got down to like the last minute, and they finally came through and did it. So for years, my annual contract renewal was like the week before Jack Daniels. And I liked it that way because if it went the week after the Jack, they'd have said, well, we'll talk to you in February. I needed to get paid all year. But that's the kind of stuff, that's the way my head always thought that, how do I figure out how to make money at this? And ironically, so what happened after that, nobody was working for, none of our guys were working for grill companies at that time. So Big Green Egg, everybody called them, not everybody, but a bunch of people called them basically to try to get the same deal. Instead of calling me and saying, hey, why don't you help me get that deal with a different grill company? They all just lined up at Big Green Egg. And, of course, none of it really – Big Green Egg said, well, we've already got a guy, so thanks, but we don't need you. But then they would tell me who it was.
That's awesome.
I was definitely making it up as I was going along, though, for sure. And then little by little, that I'm not saying I helped Big Green Egg a lot. There's no question. But they also helped me. You know, now I was the guy with this legitimate partner and showing up at all these trade shows and events where nobody else.
It's credibility both ways for you and for
exactly.
them.
And barbecue guys were not going to those kind of events back then, and all of a sudden I was. So yeah, it was pretty cool the way it all happened. But I'll say it again, entrepreneurial stuff for sure.
Mm-hmm. I love that story, and like I said, that's like really was an entree for a lot of barbecues guys, just like you said, to start looking at that as an opportunity to work for some of these bigger companies because, you know, they have marketing budgets, and why not spend it on some barbecue guys and spread the love?
Well,
that's
and
awesome.
then I was, you know, and there was a handful of us who do it pretty close at the same time, but all of a sudden I was media savvy then. You know, I also got an opportunity to write books right about the same time. I was writing cookbooks. So I'm traveling around and going on TV writing with these cookbooks I had just written. And so now all of a sudden, if you want to hire a spokesman that's a barbecue guy, well, this guy here has been on a bunch of TV shows. He already works for one company. He's written a bunch of books. I became so legitimate. You know, I got way out ahead of the pack right away. And there was a handful. I mean, another guy that sticks out is Chris Lilly. But Chris is so smooth anyway. He was going to be fine on his own. But Chris, same thing. You know, these guys would hire me and Chris, and they were getting what they wanted. They really knew we were, you know, guys that they wanted to have. And there's a handful more, and little by little it grew. But boy, it sure wasn't. You know, so the whole team of us was 15 cooks, and now it's 15,000 that are media savvy.
But there's guys like you and Tuffy Stone and Chris Lilly and Myron that are like on the top of the pack where they're working with Weber or Kingsford or Big Green Egg or, you know, some of the, and then there's a ton of smaller guys that are just their own barbecue influencers, and they work, you know, on smaller projects, which is totally fine and awesome. They're producing a lot of great content, but it's just not at that level where you're at basically mass media level, you know.
Yeah, but it's flip-flopped, so that's the thing, you know. You say that, but I don't, you know, I have 70,000 Instagram followers. That's pretty good. That's not 400,000. I don't know if I have a YouTube channel, it's just laying there with some old videos on it. I don't have 1.75 million viewers like Malcolm. I mean, these guys have lapped the field with that stuff now, and I mean, I'm not saying it's not deserved. On the other hand, let's see how that all plays out long term. You know, I don't know. We'll see how this.
Again, there's levels. There's guys like Malcolm and Heath that those guys are at the top of that game. I think everything's going to work out fine for them. But, you know, that other tier that aren't as successful and don't have great products like they do and avenues to sell those products, that it might be more challenging for.
Well, I mean, the other thing that's happening is, so social media is great, but those guys can turn on you too. You know, if TikTok decides they're not longer going to do things the way they do it, all of a sudden your business doesn't exist anymore. Now, again, Malcolm and Heath's a perfect example of guys that have created these product lines that are their entity among themselves. But it's just so different. But I always say this though too, you know, we're coming up on the American Royal, or let's say we're walking through Times Square. There's some people going to know who I am walking through Times Square. I'm not sure that everybody's going to know who these influencers are unless they're sitting in front of their monitor looking at YouTube.
You know, you're right.
Different kind of thing. But however, the brands are going all in on the influencers with the big followings, and it's hard to say that's wrong.
Yeah, no, it is, and that's our thought process. Is that's all the attention. You know, people are on their phone nonstop, flipping through whatever it is, Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, and that's where their attention is. So that's where the dollars go from the marketing perspective.
Yeah, you got to be crazy not to, exactly. But it's left myself for sure, and a lot of my cohorts out in the cold, because why would you hire me when you can hire this guy with 300,000 influencers? And, you know, it's understandable. Luckily, I'm at a point where I'm half. I think about being retired. Like some weeks I am retired, and then the next week I'm not retired again. And, you know, so I'm lucky I'm at a point where what am I going to do? Try and become a TikTok influencer at this point in my life? It's probably not going to happen.
Let's talk about some of the stuff you just wrapped up with the barbecue brawl with Bobby Flay. So what was that whole process like? Did they reach out to you? Did you sign up for something you saw online, or how did that work?
Yeah, it's funny. I'm fussing about not getting any attention anymore, and I just got off a big deal Food Network show. You know, I know. Yeah,
awesome.
it's a level of what you're used to. You know, and yeah. So the what happened there? I actually signed up to try to get on the Netflix one.
Okay.
With Melissa and Kevin Bledsoe. I can't think of the name of it, but I
know what you're talking
and
about.
they interviewed me, and they didn't need me. They didn't want me, so which is fine. But I interviewed as a cook. You know, I knew they didn't have any spots for me as a judge or anything, and it's fine. I didn't even think twice about it. But I got a call then out of the blue from the guy that runs the show, BBQ Brawl. He's been running these shows forever. I don't want to drop his name, but I've known him forever, and he'll call me every year and say, so who am I missing? You know, got anybody new? Who's out there that I'm not thinking about? And we'll have a half-hour conversation, and he's an old friend, and we'll, you know, chat and catch up a little bit and talk about this, and I'll throw some ideas out there. And actually, one of the girls, Andrea Nicholson, who's from Canada and was on BBQ Brawl, is a friend of mine from doing Fire Masters up there at that show. And he didn't know about her, which is rare anymore. So 5 years ago, 10 years ago, I would get this call, we would talk, and I might know somebody that he didn't anymore. These, you know, it's not that hard to find people, and they're making themselves out front. You know, it's not, there's no secrets anymore like that. Everybody's out there. But I did find Andrea, and we kicked some names around and stuff. And of course, the conversation always ends with me saying, "What about me? You know, can I be on the show this year?" And they're like,
"You got to sell yourself." That's awesome.
They said, "Well, we always pitch you, Ray. You know, we all know who you are. We know where to find you, and we always pitch you, but." You know, there's no opportunities for judging or captain or anything this year. And I said, well, I would cook, you know. And he said, okay, well, you know, we'll throw that out there, but I don't think that's going to be a fit for this year. And, okay, good. Thanks for calling. Good to talk to you. Well, 15 minutes later, I get a text. Are you serious that you would cook? And I said, yeah, sure, I would cook. Why wouldn't I? What am I going to ruin my career? You know, it's what's the big deal? It sounded like fun to me. I haven't done one of those in a long time. And he said, well, you know, we just wouldn't think that you would want to cook versus being a judge or a captain. I said, hey, why wouldn't I? It sounds like fun to me. I would cook for sure. So then they you know, the way they put those shows together, it's a puzzle. So they want the, you know, X amount of these kind of people and these kind of people and who's a little bit different. It's not a bunch of old white guys anymore like it was in the beginning. Old white guys and Leanne would be. Yeah. That's how they would cast the show back in the old days. And so they said, well, you know, we have a spot for, you know, the seasoned old veteran kind of guy. I'm like, well, I kind of fit that role, you know. And I said, I'd love to do it. And so they came back and they said, yeah, you know, we're gonna do this. And I really appreciate it because, you know, they like to put new people on those shows. You know, they don't necessarily want people that have been. I've been going on the Food Network probably more than any of the barbecue guys because I didn't do Pitmasters, and that was like a conflict at the time. You couldn't do both, and then with Guy, I got on a bunch of shows with Guy. So anyway, I wasn't like an unknown entity to them. So they said yeah. So anyway, they put me on, and other than Hugh Magnum, I don't know if you know Hugh from Mighty Quinns in New York. He's not as long in tooth as I am for sure, but he's not one of these young hotshot kids. The rest of them are all really people trying to make a name for themselves in the early middle of their culinary career, all there to really make some noise. And it was fun because so many of them, I mean, Logan Sandoval was a guy from California that I didn't know, and he was right next to me in the beginning, and we became friends. And Logan, I don't know how old he is. He's got to be in his 30s. If he is 30, I don't know. I'm not a very good judge of young people's ages, but Logan's got a big career ahead of himself, man. And he came there and made a bunch of attention, and everybody recognized him as this guy really knows how to cook, and it was so cool. But that clearly wasn't why I was there. And they couldn't have been nicer to me if you watched it at all. They just called me the legend. I was the '1 draft pick, which I'm not sure I was worthy of that because there's also running and jumping and carrying and stuff involved. And I'm 67 now compared to those 30-year-olds. I'm not sure that was a well-placed first pick. But anyway, I gave it a good run. I made it halfway through the show. I was happy to do that. And, man, I had a good time and met all them young people. And I said it at the end. They do all these interviews, and they didn't use it, but I said, I come here and I see this, and I'm proud of this because we were the guys that laid all the groundwork for this. We did all this. We created barbecue. I was saying this to someone the other day, one of my old friends, that, we were not cooks. We were not chefs. None of us went to culinary school. I was a truck driver. People had factory jobs and stuff, and we learned how to cook barbecue, and some of us morphed into chefs over the years. For me, when other chefs started calling me chef, I accepted it. But we're not that kind of chef. Like, you went to culinary school to learn those things. Well, these people are coming from the other direction. The people I'm cooking with there on BBQ Brawl all have been working in fancy restaurants for years, and now they're becoming barbecue guys. And it's a whole different way to come after it, and it's impressive. I mean, the food they were cooking is, I hate to admit it publicly, but I can't cook like that. Those guys were above and beyond anything I can do. But I had a great time. It was fun, and I learned a lot.
How was working with Bobby Flay? Was that a cool experience?
It really was, yeah. I didn't really know Bobby. I'd met him briefly, but I never really knew Bobby. And and he's right there in the middle of the show. I mean, he's at the next booth over, and he comes over and says hi, and you chat with him. And he knew who I was. It's not like we don't have a bunch of mutual friends. And but it was really cool because Bobby could have. It's Bobby's show. He owns the whole thing. So Bobby could have easily said, "Yeah, we don't really want that guy on the show." So I know Bobby's put his thumbs up about me when it came down to it. So that made me feel good.
Sure.
Bobby could say yes or no to pretty much anything that happens there. Sonny, who was my captain and is a doll. I'd never met Sonny before either. She was a doll. She dogged Bobby from the time they walked into the set at 8 in the morning till the time we went home at 8 at night. So a lot of it's for camera, a lot of it's not. She never let up. She threatened him that he better not buy a bespoke cat because he needs a new cat. All of a sudden, for some reason, she's dogging him for an hour to not buy a bespoke cat.
Oh my gosh.
Crazy stuff. Like, it was so funny. I mean, all day, nonstop. Bobby could easily say, we need to tone that down, or don't have her on the show next year. But he's obviously enjoying it, and he's seems to be in a great spot in his life as well. And when we got done, when I got booted off about halfway through, so what happens when they boot you off? They shuffle you away. Like, because they don't know if you're going to go nuts and try to kill everybody or at least yell at everybody. I'm sure it's happened over those shows. These guys have done a lot of reality shows, So they shuffle you off by this minivan, and you're going to get a ride home by yourself today. And they like take you over there to see if you're going to calm down, and then they want to interview you right away if you've calmed down. So I did. I was fine, So I'm over by the van, and Bobby comes over there specifically over to me and says, "Hey, thank you, Ray. Thanks for being on the show," and he goes on his way. He doesn't do that for everybody. So it made me feel really good that they, the respect and love they showed me. And then they did interview me because I wasn't going to stab anybody. I was good.
I have a ton of respect for Bobby Flay. What he's been able to do over his career is unbelievable. When he started way, way back in the day, you remember the grilling and chilling days?
Yeah.
And how he's developed. And I remember my dad used to give me a hard time, like, oh, Bobby Flay, like, he thought he was like a nothing. But man, as far as like cooking competitions in that TV setting, he's at the top of the list, man, because he's done so much of it. He's done it for years, decades.
And years. I mean, he started it way back, not the beginning of the Food Network, but boy, pretty early. And he's still there doing it, producing shows. I mean, it's really impressive. Yeah, it was really. I told him a story. Years ago, there was a show called Ready, Set, Cook. I think that's what it was called. There was a. Remember that show? They had stole the show from England, And it was a little competition cook. And he's on there with Emerald. Emerald's at the height of his crazy Emerald popularity. And he's cooking against Bobby. And Emerald's, I don't know if he's drunk or he's cooked, but he can't figure out what to cook. They got ground meat, I think, and Emerald doesn't know what to cook. And Bobby's cooking away. He looks at Emerald and he goes, why don't you make like some meatball gumbo? And Emerald's like, oh, yeah, that's a great idea. So he makes meatball gumbo because he had no idea. It was so funny. Bobby bailed him out. And
oh my gosh.
And I told him that story, and he didn't remember it, but he thought it was pretty funny. Because when I made meatballs and grits at one point, and I told him, I said, yeah, it's just, I always think about that. Like, meatballs are always a viable option. But I always remember that story. I mean, Bobby goes way, and with Jack McDavid, I don't know how long ago that is. Jeez, I haven't seen Jack in 15 years, and it was old at that point. So, Bobby definitely is a legend on that channel. But he's still nice. I mean, he's doing, he's hanging out with guys like Michael Voltaggio and Sonny and Brooke. And these are all Bobby's old, but Bobby, I joked that he might have had me on the show so somebody'd be older than him. I think he's 59.
Right.
So he's older than all these people too. But yeah, that was really impressive.
Well, what a great experience. I've applied for all those type of shows, and they always have me back for like a second interview, a second phone call, and I figured that I'm just too white. They have too many. They don't. I don't fit in their demographic enough.
You do. So when we were doing it, if there was 12 spots, 10 of them would be whoever they were. We joke about like old white guys with beards. Well, at least you don't have a beard these days. But back then, 10 of the spots could be old white guys with beards. Well, they can't anymore, and rightfully so. It shouldn't be,
Right.
So there might be 2 slots for old white guys with beards, and if you don't get one of those 2 slots, you're out of luck. Where in our day, we could be all old white guys with beards. we weren't that old then, but
yeah, no, it makes sense, and I've got so much on my plate right now.
Keep trying, though. You never know.
I mean, it'd be fun. Like you said, it'd be fun. It would be fun. I for sure agree. Well, you had mentioned earlier that we're getting ready for the Jack, and that's a exciting time of the year, and you're always down there as a judge. Tell us some stories about being at the Jack, or how that week goes for you as just part of the traditions that you do down there.
Yeah, man, I've been going, I don't know, it had to be 95 maybe the first time I went, something like that. So yeah, it's probably 30 years of going to the Jack. I might have missed a year or two in there. And I actually was very lucky over the years. I mean, I was get regular. None of us won 7 back then to qualify automatically. I mean, that was pretty unusual. And they made that rule up. We were all laughing, like, who's going to get that, It was more jockeying for positions of state championships and hey, I'm going to go cook in Montana because it's an automatic, and Alaska and stuff like that. But I was lucky to get drawn a lot and qualify compared to some guys who just never, they qualify their whole life and never get drawn. So I cooked a lot down there, and I really had a lot of fun. And I had Marsha Russell, or Marsha Hale these days, is an old friend of mine, and so she would like help me get set up with a good spot back in the day when you had to like jockey for position and get a good spot. And then if I wasn't qualified, we'd cook for the football team because Marsha's kid was playing. And so, I mean, I've really made a lot of friends down there over the years and have hung out a lot and cooked a lot. And then, probably 10 years ago, I started getting an opportunity to judge, and judging's great down there. It's really so much fun. Because they put us all in the judging arena, and they put them cattle fence up around us, and so you can go over and talk to folks and give them the leftover food and do whatever. But inside is the cast of judges is really fun. It's an interesting crew. They've evolved to a lot of us old timer judges or competition guys. But it's fun. It's great to see everybody. The one year I started, it was like I never take any pictures. I got to take some. And I got a picture of me with Mike Mills, and one with Pat Burke, and one with Famous Dave, and Trig, and and so it's really the judging tent is really a lot of fun. And then the food comes, of course, and that's really quite an adventure as well. The only thing I'll say, the actual 4 categories have become, it's almost identical. especially there, because this is the top of the food chain. These are the guys that are good at it. And even the European teams now, when Jackie Waite won way back in the day, everybody was mad at up in arms. She must have cheated. How could a Brit actually win the Jack? Well, she could. She had come to Lynchburg and taken a class with me. She bought a cooker from Fast Eddy, and he'd helped her. And, nobody wanted to accept that. Now the international teams are good.
With the internet, the cat is 100% out of the bag.
Yeah.
If you take a class, or especially if you take 2 classes, and you get the same cooker, and you have all access to all the information with the seasonings and sauces and rubs and techniques that these guys do, that for sure you're able to do it. But I still stand by that you need to put the time in. You have to do enough competitions to get the reps in.
Yeah.
So when time comes and the wind's a little different that day, or there's adversity, you can still stay on course. But it's amazing with the access to all the information that anybody can watch. Oh, and that's the other challenge, right? Is to get you have to get the Wagyu brisket and the heritage breed pork and the Amish chicken. And it's total different level than when I first started, and then I probably did competitions for about 10 years. And even then, I think I stopped really in 2018. It's crazy to where it's gotten. I'm excited to go to the Jack myself. This is the first time I've ever going to go, and I'm going to cook with the barbecue bus guys. They had asked me last year to go, and I couldn't make it because of work stuff. And I'm really, really excited to go down there.
Oh yeah, it's so much fun, and just seeing all the people and walking around the square, and it's really. You never know who you're going to run into there.
Yeah, it's like the who's who of barbecue down there. You'll see all the top guys. And even a lot of times, like if, Tuffy doesn't qualify and those top guys, they don't qualify, they'll still go down and do some filming or be a judge or something like that, So
hanging around for
big
sure.
dogs.
Yeah, it's for me, it's probably the most fun of the year. It's a challenge. It's Lynchburg. There's no hotels. There's, it's kind of you don't wear your good shoes because your shoes are gonna be a mess. They're either gonna be packed with dust or they're gonna be packed with mud. One or the other. It's dirt. It's whether it's wet or not. But
that's good advice.
Such good. The history of going down there and seeing everybody's just such a treat, really.
So after the Jack, then you have the American Royal, and you have some duties down there. What do you usually take care of down at the American Royal?
Yeah, American Royal. I actually went there before the Jack in the early '90s. It's the history there is
crazy.
Forever going down there. But over the years, I was inducted into the Barbecue Hall of Fame in 2014, and after that, it's always awkward, when we were trying to get the Barbecue Hall of Fame going. You don't want to be too forward trying to help with it because you don't want to be like lobbying to be inducted, So once I was inducted in 2014, I started offering to help and sticking my nose in some places, and they need help always, and I knew all them people. So little by little, I've helped them. I'm on the nominating committee for the Barbecue Hall of Fame now, which is really fun actually. That's come a long way. We fuss about a lot of things, but that one's been fixed pretty good as far as I'm concerned at the moment. We'll see how that goes. But then I showed up, and it was time for the awards, and they asked me to introduce some people, and little by little I became sort of the guy that gets to introduce all the Hall of Fame inductees, and it's pretty cool. And I really, it's such a treat, such an honor.
I was talking to Uncle Dave about it, and it's like you're so natural at that. It's just you do such a great job, and it's not like you're straining for words or anything. It was such a great experience. We were there last year. Of course, Uncle Dave got inducted, and it was a really, really cool experience. For my whole family, we brought the kids down there, and my wife and his wife and Ron, our competition partner, and it was just one of the highlights of the year, absolutely. And one of Dave's highlights of his life. He really had a good time down there, and you made it special when you were talking about him too. So I appreciate that.
Well, it's very cool for me because a lot of these guys that are coming in are my friends that I've known for years, and the stories that are going to be told. I was there. There's so much of it. Fast Eddy's going in this year. Me and Eddy been friends, and cooking up different things to do, and for many years. And Eddy,
what is
I
Eddy
know.
up to now? Is he still producing smokers and everything like that?
Yeah, I mean, I was going to say it's on autopilot with Cook Shack, but it's really not, because Eddy's always up to something new. They've got a pellet-fired pizza oven that Eddy's all over these days. He's obsessed with it. Matter of fact, if you come this year to the Royal, Eddy's going to have a little party after the awards and cook us some pizzas. So
nice.
So yeah, Eddy's always up to something new. And Danielle, Diva Q, she's getting inducted this year too. Danielle, I met Danielle in Canada 20 years ago, and she just showed up, and I asked her if she wanted to judge. I think it was me. Somehow she ended up judging. I was like the head judge of this thing, and Danielle showed up and was judging. I mean, long before she was who she is these days. So it's just cool. I have such a relationship with so many of these people that it makes it easy and fun to introduce them.
Yeah. Diva Q definitely is so passionate about barbecue. She's a close friend. Dave absolutely loves her, and she's an open book, just like most barbecue people are. I mean, if you ask her a question on how she cooks her chicken or anything like that, she's more than welcome to help you out and point you in the right direction.
Yeah, there's no secrets anymore, that's for sure. We used to say we'd tell you 80% in the heavy competition days, and you had to figure out the other 20 on your own. Now it's like, you give me $800 and I'll give you the whole 100%.
Yeah, they are so many classes now. It's crazy. Well, what else do you got going on? What else is coming up for Dr. Barbecue?
Well, I do have a new line of seasonings. So when our restaurant closed and I quit working for Big Green Egg, the one thing I'd been wanting to do for a while was have a line of seasonings. And it doesn't go unnoticed how successful some of my friends are at this these days. So I was like, maybe I should jump in on this. But I had some ideas that I wanted to do specifically. And like I said, working for Green Egg and working for the restaurant, it was just going to be a conflict because we couldn't use my rubs on everything at the restaurant, the things I wanted to do. And it just was going to be confusing. So anyway, as soon as the restaurant was done, I was like, well, let's do this now. So the things I wanted to do, I had a hot chicken rub, and it's really hot. So if you're looking for a hot chicken rub that's not medium, my hot chicken rub is excellent. And then I already had that. We were using that at the restaurant some. And I had one of my old cookbooks, I had a peach chipotle barbecue sauce. It was a jar of peach preserves and a little can of chipotles and some other stuff mixed in. That was the beginning of the barbecue sauce. Well, we morphed that into a sauce we could use at the restaurant. So that was our sweet and hot sauce, was our peach chipotle. So I had those. I didn't want to do a sauce, so I turned that into a dry rub. So I had the hot chicken in that one, and then I always wanted to do an Italian beef rub. When I moved to Florida, I couldn't get any Italian beef. Chicago-style guy wanted some Italian beefs, and I couldn't get any. And so I learned how to make them myself. Not that hard, or anything, but it involved at the time buying a slicer and slicing it myself at home. And, I got to where I could make pretty good Italian beef. But I wanted to make a dry rub that you could use it on a pork chop or something and have a nice Italian flavor. But you could also measure out a third of a cup of olive oil, a third a cup of the dry rub, 2 cups of water, and warm it up in a pot for literally 2 minutes and have really good Italian beef. And I did that. So the original recipe involved, though, you still had to buy a slicer or slice really carefully by hand. And I was goofing around online one day. There's like an Italian beef lovers page on Facebook. And these guys were all doing something similar, but they were buying a pound of sliced roast beef at the deli and throwing it in. I was like, that's genius. So that's my new 5-minute Italian beef recipe. But the rub is really good, and it's exactly that. It's nice on a pork chop or something, nice Italian herby flavor, prime rib. But if you take a third a cup of it with a third a cup of oil and 2 cups of water, I'm telling you, it makes great Italian beef gravy. And for those of us not in Chicago, it's really something nice to have.
What is your go-to Italian beef in Chicago?
If I was going today, I'd go to Scatchell's.
Ooh, I don't know Scatchell's.
Scatchell's has become pretty famous. It's a funky old place on Cicero Avenue and Cermak, I think it is. Cermak, it's Cermak. Right in Cicero, right by the where the old Western Electric plant used to be. It was a funky little place. I've been going because I was a truck driver for years, and that's where it was one of my favorites back then. Unfortunately, some of my favorites are gone. Joe Boston's on Grand and Chicago Avenue in Chicago was my favorite. I went there forever, and that guy Spiro became my friend, and I had him on Best Thing I Ever Ate. We went to Joe Boston's, but Spiro finally sold the property, and they tore it down, and that's the end of it. No more Joe Boston's, and so many of those are just gone over the years, and I miss them. Everybody wants to talk about Johnny's. I don't love Johnny's. I'm not that big of a fan.
I think Johnny's has changed, though. Johnny's in 1989 was different than today.
Yeah.
I mean, when my family was a Johnny's family, but I mean, my dad would drive from Wisconsin to Johnny's before he went to see Uncle Dave or anything. He would go 5 hours straight to Johnny's, and that's what I grew up on. So that's what I like. But it's just they don't put as much beef on it. It's a little spicier than it was today. Not that I don't like the spice, but it's just different, So,
yeah, nobody makes a loaded up beef like they used to. They couldn't possibly do it. You understand, but.
Yeah, they got to charge $15 for a beef now.
Well, there's so few places that actually even make the beef anymore. And I'm sure Johnny's does and Scatchell's does.
Yeah.
Scatchell's is a little different. It's got like a little orange hue to it. I don't know what they're putting in there, but it's good.
Huh.
I went to another place, though, not far from you. Did you ever go to Franny's on River Road and just north of Lawrence?
No.
Like in that weird curve there up on River Road. And I'd heard about it, and they're definitely making their own beef, homemade fries, and like some Italian guys that look like they're going to kick your ass. So, everything you want in a good beef joint.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I mean, I don't go to a ton of beef stands, but, it's something that I remember from my childhood, and when you get done eating the beef sandwich, your hands, you just smell like it for hours. It's just so many good memories of eating Italian ice outside of Johnny's, and it's just
Italian
like just a family memory for
sure.
So
what I do is I keep gloves in my car and put the gloves on before you eat the beef. Because we have Portillo's down here now, and we could talk all day about Portillo's and how much they suck. But when you live in St. Petersburg, Florida, and there's a Portillo's, trust me, you're happy to get it. It's nice to be in there. So I keep gloves in my car for eating the dipped Italian beef safely in the car.
That's awesome. Oh man. So let's talk just briefly a little bit about the evolution of barbecue, how you saw it back in the 80s and 90s and to where it is today and where it might go in the future. Is there anything that comes to mind where things that stand out as far as like the evolution and how it's changed?
Yeah, well, speaking as a guy from Chicago, we didn't really have any barbecue. In the black neighborhoods there was barbecue, but I figured it out. It wasn't a black thing in the big cities up north. It was a southern thing. Because all of the white people came from Ellis Island. Not all, but the white people came from Ellis Island. And the black people in the city in Chicago came from Mississippi, Alabama. They came from the South. And they brought real barbecue with them. So that's what was weird about it. Whatever barbecue we might have had where I lived was, probably some boiled ribs with like supper club ribs, I call them, We certainly, there was nowhere in Chicago. When I started cooking in the 80s and 90s, there was nowhere to buy a brisket. You literally didn't know where to get one, a fresh brisket. You had to go to a market and find a market like in Skokie in the Jewish neighborhood to get a brisket. It just didn't exist. So it was so unknown, and then it started to become popular, and the way I see it was what helped, and again, this is as a guy who was living in Chicago at the time, we started to see Southern Prides and Old Hickories showing up, and all of a sudden it wasn't that hard to cook some barbecue. Was it great? No, it was okay. You could cook good barbecue on Old Hickories and Southern Prides, but you could cook lame barbecue too. If you didn't know what you were doing, if you didn't use the right amount of wood at the right time, if you tried to rush it, if you didn't clean your cooker. So we got, in my mind, we saw this, and this happened a lot of places too because it was so easy. And Southern Pride and Old Hickory and Cook Shack too. Those guys will sell you rub, they'll sell you sauce. I mean, the barbecue got very mediocre. everybody could cook okay barbecue. Pulled pork was no longer a secret to anybody. You cook a pork butt, it falls apart. You talk a little sauce on it and put it on a sandwich. Boom, you got barbecue. Was it great barbecue? No, it was and it became really kind of so popular and so not great, and that was disappointing to me. And then we saw the Aaron Franklin effect. Those guys in Texas started saying, well, no, wait a minute. We're going to go back to doing it the old way, which I'm not sure a lot of that is the old way, but whatever. It doesn't matter. They started doing this more traditional barbecue thing, and that caught on. So now we see Texas barbecue everywhere. Which is fine with me. I'm not mad about that at all. I'm not sure it all really is Texas, and that doesn't matter either, though. But the quality's gotten good. It's now gotten to where you can find good barbecue in a lot of places. And brisket has become, you can buy a brisket at Publix right now. I don't know about up there at Jewel, but you probably get one at Jewel. It's become so available. And those briskets aren't for making corned beef. Those briskets are for cooking barbecue. And it's really cool to be able to see that. The KCBS rule that says, I don't know what it is at the moment, but like a pork butt had to be about 5 pounds. That rule was written, I was part of it at the time, in the middle, I might have been on the board. That rule was written because guys would come to town without a pork butt to cook in a contest, and they would be looking to buy a pork butt at the local grocery store. And the grocery stores didn't always have whole ones in the case or around even. They would cut a couple pork steaks off of them, and there'd be about a half of it laying there as a pork shoulder butt. And that's what was available. You couldn't buy a whole butt on demand, So it's changed so much. The understanding of barbecue, the availability of the products, the technique. This social media and the internet has helped so much with that. Thermometers. There's just so many tools now. So in general, it's not that hard to find pretty good barbecue anymore. Anywhere you go. And think about it in Chicago. What I'm saying, there was no good real barbecue. Now you can't swing a dead cat without finding a good barbecue restaurant.
Yeah. Even when we opened our first restaurant in 2005, there was the competition.
Forever, man.
Yeah, there was hardly anything, and now it's crazy how many barbecue places there are. It is really, really a big difference, and you just laid it down there. That was an awesome explanation, Ray.
Well,
very good job. Very well said.
So aside from Sweet Baby Ray's, where do you go eat barbecue around Chicago?
Well, there are a lot of good places, and, Smoke at Barry's,
Barry,
he does a great job. There are places, I don't go out to a ton of barbecue places, but we the only one that's coming to mind right now, and there's a new place called Soul and Smoke, but the only reason I'm saying that is because we cater at a venue where they're kind of got like a little storefront right next to the venue that we cater at, but there's like Willie's at Honky Tonk Barbecue. I think he does a good job.
What about Green Street? Did you ever go down to Green Street?
Green Street when they first opened? Yeah, it was good. Kind of like Texas style when you go up and order at the counter and they pull it off. All these barbecue guys are gonna. Whoever listens is gonna be like, Duce, you're failing here miserably. There are a lot of good barbecue places around though. But I always tell people too is like we use Southern Pride, and I love Southern Pride from the perspective of if you're looking to do high volume and consistent barbecue, it's great. But you're never going to be able to replicate the flavor of an offset cooker like an Aaron Franklin or like some of these guys use. It's just not the same, but it is very, very good.
Well, it's restaurant equipment. What are you going to do? You're running a big catering company. Now, those guys in Texas get away with it with those big 1,000-gallon cookers. Good luck doing that in Chicago. You're not going to be able to pull that off.
But I tell, exactly. And I tell people, well, I'm not just doing barbecue because we have the whole other side of the catering business that's high-end. So it's like we have a component of our business that is barbecue, but there's also, 15 other things or more than that going on in the backside. When you guys had the Dr. Barbecue restaurant in Florida, what smokers did you use?
We had an oiler. We had a big oiler. which Oilers, if you don't know what those are, I know you do, but it's like a big commercial pit, but they run only on wood. You can't, there is no gas assist.
Yes.
So it's a challenge. You got to be careful because if you don't put wood in there, it's going to go out. And if you put too much wood, it's not going to be good. So they're not that easy to cook on. Like, it's certainly, I wish we would have had Southern Pride's many nights when you could just turn it on and leave.
Yeah.
And we had an old hickory in the back that we ran hot.
Okay.
And it was a good combo for there. I mean, it's
so
hard.
Did you still cook the briskets and butts overnight, or did you time it so it would be during the day when people were there to feed the fire?
No, we cooked them overnight. We did it a lot of different ways. We had an overnight guy at one point, but you can imagine how that went.
He was having fun by himself.
Yeah, it didn't go well. But we had it to where if we stoked the fire at 11, get a good bed of coals going, and stoke the fire at 11 o'clock at night on the way out the door, and then a guy was in at 6 o'clock, it would be okay. The fire would be fading, but we could salvage it. Problem was they wouldn't do it. They would quit. So the last guy would leave at 9:30. Nobody would look at the fire, and then the other guy showed up an hour late, and the fire was out in the morning. So it was always a challenge. Nobody was doing the thing now where they cook all day and put in a holding cabinet overnight. I wish we would have thought of that because that we would have done that in a second. But we honestly had just never thought of it. I don't know who was doing that at the time. I don't think anybody was doing it yet.
Right. Well, that's when I went.
Thing.
Well, when I went to Franklin's, we were there earlier this year because of Cater Source, the big catering convention. It was right in Austin this year, which was awesome because I had never been to Franklin's, and I wanted to go check it out. So got the little tour in the back, and that's what he said. Their guys cook from 2 in the morning to 2 p.m., and then the briskets go in the holder for the next day. So it's pretty interesting method that they have.
I don't believe they were doing that in the early days either, though.
Yeah, they probably had to figure that out.
Yeah,
but
somebody came up with that idea, and then everybody ripped it off because it was a great idea.
Yeah.
Because you got to have all those holding cabinets anyway. If you're smart, you got good quality ones. What's the difference if you put the food in there at 6 in the morning or at 6 in the evening for the next day? They're going to be better if you. So yeah.
Well, that's really their whole thing is that they have a 12-hour rest period on their brisket, and that's part of the reason why they got no. When you get a slice, nothing crumbles off because it's all soft. It's been sitting there all in its own juices and everything, wrapped up in that paper. So,
but also,
it was good.
Imagine trying to explain that to the health department in Wooddale.
Yeah, well, that's the whole thing with the cookers outside. That ain't gonna fly. Maybe you could get away with the holding, but the cookers outside, those big 1,000-gallon things, that ain't happening.
But you say that, but what temperature you think they're really holding those briskets for 16 hours for?
Yeah, that's true. Well, they should be holding above 145, but I mean,
you know what I'm saying? It's
It's interesting for sure. All I'll say is this: I had very good, moist, delicious brisket when I was at Franklin's.
Yes, I agree. The food's good, and no question about that. What always bugs me about that, though, if you're at Franklin and any of those cool places in Austin, I wrote a book about 20 years ago called Barbecue Road Trip, and I went to Austin, and there was nothing there. None of that stuff was there. There was Ironworks, which is still there, an old place. Stubbs, which really not a barbecue restaurant. It was a place called House Park. And then Rudy's was up in Round Rock. Those are the places I went to because there was nothing else there. And now they got all these famous places in Austin.
Terry Black's.
But if you ride down to Lockhart, there's Schmitty's and Kreitz and Black's that are all around 100 years old. It's like, why would you wait in line at Franklin when you can go to 300-year-old restaurants right down the road?
If I had my choice and I could only go to one more barbecue place, I'd go to Louis Mueller's.
Yeah.
I had such an amazing experience there. I mean, it feels like you're 100 years old. It feels like you're walking back 100 years.
Yes.
And the pepper bark on they had beef ribs when I was there, and the brisket, and they had the mason jar, ice cold with Shiner Black beer, and it was like lights out, the best experience I had in Texas with barbecue. there were so many awesome places. Don't get me wrong. We had great experiences everywhere. Kreitz's, to me, had the best pork ribs I've ever had and stuff like that. But that Louis Mueller experience, the first time I was in Texas, it was like quintessential smoky Texas barbecue. It was amazing.
I totally agree. Might have been the one best barbecue experience I ever had in my life at Louis Mueller, for sure.
Oh, really? That's so cool. That was good. Good deal. All right, Ray. Well, usually what we do on the show is we'll wrap it up with a lightning round. So I've got a list of 10 items, and you just give me your first quick response. You ready?
Yep.
Favorite barbecue meat to cook?
If I'm eating, it changes day to day. If it's for other people, it's ribs.
All right. Favorite barbecue joint in Chicago?
We can't say Sweet Baby Ray's, right?
You could say Sweet Baby Ray's. I will not hold that against you.
All right, Sweet Baby Ray's. That's an easy one.
All right. All right, this is kind of fun. Most underrated barbecue region. Underrated.
Yeah, that's a tricky one because the whole region thing is just nonsense. I mean, there's the regions do not include Alabama or Georgia or
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think there's barbecue there. Texas, all the barbecue in Texas is not the same. So I always have a hard time with that regional thing. I'm gonna call that an unfair question and not answer that.
Not answer that question. Okay, now you're at home. You definitely don't say Sweet Baby Ray's for this. your go-to barbecue sauce for a home cook. What is it? A homemade or do you have a brand? You could say Sweet Baby Ray's, but
it really is Sweet Baby Ray's because everybody likes it. It's just not anything else you get. You have to talk about it. You're gonna have to explain. They may like it, they may not. If you buy Sweet Baby Ray's, everybody's happy. I bought a big fat bottle the other day because I do cooking segments on TV here the other day, and I made meatballs with I put coffee in the meatballs, little cocktail meatballs, and the sauce was just Sweet Baby Ray's. And I remembered along the way, I was like, I forgot this was the genius addition was Kahlua. So at home, I fixed the recipe and I added Kahlua to the Sweet Baby Ray's with the coffee meatballs. But it really is my go-to at home, unless if I'm feeling like Blues Hog, or which is now becoming available everywhere. But it's
Blues Hog is great for competition, but it's almost too much for like a day-to-day barbecue sauce.
Yeah, I agree with you. But boy, I don't know. They seem to be doing pretty well.
I love it. I wish them all the best. I am so impressed by Tim Shear and with Gateway Drums and their success in competitions and Blues Hog. I'm impressed with them.
Talk about some entrepreneurial spirit, boy. So I was one time driving around in the car with your Uncle Dave and Dave Raymond or Dave Anderson from Famous
Oh my
Dave.
gosh!
The three of us are riding.
There's
around
a lot
in
of barbecue
Chicago.
power in that.
Oh
car.
Yeah, we're riding around Chicago, going in people's restaurants. We went to Honky Tonk and who was that cute little girl that had a restaurant for a while? I think it's gone now. I forget what her name was.
Leanne Whippen?
No, not Leanne. No. It was somewhere on the north side. It was a weird little store. Anyway, we're bouncing around.
Charity Smith, maybe?
Yeah, that's who it was, yes. And we're going to these restaurants. Anyway, your uncle Dave Anderson is complaining to your uncle the whole ride that his barbecue sauce is too cheap. It's not fair to sell it that cheap because it steals all the business from everybody else, and he shouldn't be selling it for $1 or whatever he was accusing him of. And then your uncle drives us through Humboldt Park, like not the good part of Humboldt Park, and it was like out of a movie. There's a bunch of scary like drug dealers under this tree, and he at the time he had this old BMW. It was a nice car. It didn't seem like he had taken it in for service very often. And I thought we were all gonna die in Humboldt Park. It would have been fitting though. Me and the two Daves dying in Humboldt Park. But then we get down to the end of the road and it's a dead end. We got to turn around and go back by these guys. And me and those two, it's a great story.
That's a typical Uncle Dave story.
Oh gosh, it was. I'll never forget that one. But anyway, I always thought that was funny. So anyway, I'm sure if you had Tim Shear on here being honest, he'd be like, why do you guys sell that stuff so cheap, man? Quit doing that. Because for whatever reason, Sweet Baby Ray's has been able to get their product to a point where they can sell it cheap, and it's still good, and it still makes money, obviously.
Yeah. Well, now we're totally off track on the lightning round, but that's okay. So I have a friend with a barbecue place out in California, and they had a big mess they had their own sauce, they had a co-packer. The co-packer flaked out on them, so they don't have any sauce. And I said, well, what are you doing? He's like, well, we're buying Sweet Baby Ray's. And I said, well, smart of you, because you know it's a good sauce and people like it. You know, it's a great thing. And just like you added coffee or Kahlua to it, people do that all the time. And I take it as a great compliment. Well, I add, open pit to my Sweet Baby Ray's, and that's our house barbecue sauce.
So I talk about a Chicago thing, man. That's the perfect combo.
Yeah, no kidding. All right. Who's your favorite pitmaster to compete against?
Yeah, probably Myron, because if you beat Myron, you know he'd hate you. He was so mad about it. So I love Myron. He's my friend, but Myron was like, there was no better competitor than Myron. Nobody wanted to win more than Myron ever, and I'm sure he's exactly the same way. I remember I beat him in Texas on one of them TV shows one time, and we're friends, but man, he was mad. So, it was always fun to cook against Myron.
Okay, what's your favorite barbecue tool? Like, if it could be a smoker or a grill, but what besides that, probably
Thermopen, man, that changed our lives. The Thermopen, we all had junk thermometers, whatever you could find. If you dropped it, if it, we didn't know how accurate they were, and then along came Thermopens, and we all bought them and thought it was crazy amount of money, but man, to this day, it changed everything. Now we had to learn how to use it. We had to learn what was the correct temp, to use it properly. But we were lost before that and found with it, man. Totally.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, and it's so versatile too with steaks. I use it on chicken all the time at home. Yeah, it just takes all the guesswork out of it. It's like you just check it, and if it's 165, then it's done. I use it all the time.
Turkey cutlets or fillet tenders in a skillet yesterday in the kitchen using my Thermopen because it's turkey. If I overcook it, it'll be no good. If I cook it just right, it'll be great. And sure enough,
Favorite memory from BBQ Brawl?
So the first thing they make everybody do is cook a slider. So I'm just gonna I just cooked a short rib chuck brisket slider with some grilled onions, and I made comeback sauce and made it real simple. And because I knew it's the first round, we weren't getting kicked off for that anyway. I wasn't that worried about it. I wasn't gonna try and cook a bunch of something real crazy, and they all thought I was nuts. Then I was just laying low. So Bobby comes over, and him and the Sonny and Michael are trying our sliders, and he said, "Ray, do you think all these competitors are intimidated by you?" And I said, "Bobby, I don't think they know who I am." And he said, because I really didn't. They're all young, and they don't, and he says, "You guys know who he is?" And they're all like, "Yeah, we know who he is." I'm not sure they did, though. They might have been just being nice, or they might have learned who I was. I'm curious. I would be curious how many of them had to Google me when we showed up. But
well, that's the thing now. They probably did just Google you.
Right. Yeah.
What is comeback sauce?
It's kind of like a burger sauce that you make, mayo, ketchup, a little lemon juice, I think, in there. I don't remember exactly, but it's a common Southern thing. Come on, Duce, you got to know about that.
Yeah. Well, I know the type of sauce now that you said
that's
for
what it
sure.
is.
All right, dream guest. If you're cooking barbecue, you can pick one person, historic figure or present day. Who is it coming to your table to eat some
Julia
barbecue
Child.
with you? Nice. That's the second person that said that on the show.
Julia was a big barbecue fan.
Really? I didn't know that.
Yeah, she really was. A lot of guys got to cook with her. Jim Tabb was friends with her. Leanne's dad was friends with her. And she loved barbecue, and they cooked a lot at different events because of her, with her. And I never got the chance to meet her. I've been lucky enough to meet a lot of famous people, all my, your heroes. I never got a chance to meet Julia, and it always bums me out. So, yeah, she'd be my choice for sure.
Ray, you're an absolute pleasure to talk to, my man, and I really appreciate you taking the time for the show. It was really awesome to see you.
Fun, Duce. Good to hear you, and we'll do it again.
And I'm going to get to see you at the Jack, so
yes.
I'm really looking forward to that. That's only a few weeks away. I cannot believe it. Seemed like it was going to be here forever, and now, like, in 2 weeks, it's going to be.
You seem so excited.
Up.
You seem like a guy who works 80 hours a week that's going to get 3 days off.
Yeah, right? It's going to be. I'm flying down on Friday. I'm getting there, renting a car, going down there all day on, Friday night, get all my stuff ready, be there on Saturday, and then Sunday morning I'm flying right back out because
you work 80 hours a week.
Yeah, not that much. No, I don't work 80 hours a week.
Okay, good.
I used to, but I don't have to anymore, so that's good.
Well, you should go on Thursday if you can, because Friday all day is a lot of fun.
Okay.
Because otherwise you're going to be busy doing all your stuff on Friday, and you're not going to have time for any fun. So,
okay.
If you can get away, go Thursday.
Ray, it's always a pleasure, my man. We will talk to you soon.
Hey, thanks, Duce. A lot of pleasure, man. Good to see you.